Welcome back to Lena's Romantasy Collection, where the romance is magical and the alphas are usually obsessed. Quick question for the collection before we get started. Where are you listening from right now? Let me know in the comments and drop a blueberry emoji if you think a lemur would make a better receptionist than most humans. Today we have a fan favorite. It's hilarious, it's steamy, and it involves a stressed-out billionaire, a very grumpy healer, and an accidental noise that changes everything. But before we start, if you want to support the channel and get early access to these stories, hit that join button down below. It helps us keep the lights on and the romance coming. Now grab your headphones, the alpha is on the table, and he's about to freeze. Let's read. Chapter 1. The boardroom of Hale Sovereign Securities smelled of fear and stale coffee. Tommy, the beta who ran Jackson's life with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker, slid a tablet across the polished mahogany table. "Sign it," Tommy said. Alpha Jackson Hale didn't look at the tablet. He was staring out the floor-to-ceiling window at the rain-soaked skyline of Athelgard, trying to remember what sleep felt like. His reflection stared back, hollow cheeks, ink-black hair that looked like he'd been dragged through a hedge backward, and icy silver-blue eyes that burned with a fatigue so deep it felt like acid in his veins. "I don't need a therapist," Jackson growled. His voice was a low rumble that vibrated the water in the glass pitcher on the table. "I need whiskey and a mute button for the pack link." "You haven't slept in 72 hours, Jackson," Tommy said, unimpressed by the alpha display. "Yesterday, you nearly ripped the throat out of the courier because he was chewing gum too loudly. The stocks dropped 2 points. The board is nervous. I am nervous." Jackson rubbed his right shoulder. The movement was stiff, guarded. Under his expensive charcoal suit jacket, the cursed scar tissue on his rotator cuff pulsed with a dull, throbbing ache that never, ever stopped. It was like having a hot coal embedded in the muscle. "They all want to touch the neck," Jackson muttered, turning from the window. He was a massive man, built like a heavyweight boxer, and he moved with the predatory grace of something that could kill you before you blinked. "They get too close. The wolf doesn't like it." "Vance Holistic Healing," Tommy read from the screen. "Ariana Vance. She's the last one in the city who hasn't blacklisted you. She specializes in difficult cases, which is polite medical speak for alphas who act like toddlers." Jackson scoffed. "Holistic? What is she going to do? Wave a crystal at me and tell me my chakras are blocked?" "She's an omega," Tommy said. "Omegas are calming." "Omegas are fragile," Jackson corrected. "I'll break her." "Book the appointment, Jackson, or I call your mother." Jackson froze. The threat was nuclear. He snatched the tablet, his large fingers nearly cracking the screen. He scrolled through the website. It was professional, devoid of the usual moon goddess nonsense, just a list of credentials and a strict cancellation policy. "Fine," Jackson snapped. "I'll go. I'll let her poke me for 10 minutes. She'll realize she can't fix a hexed wound with lavender oil, and then you will leave me alone." "Excellent," Tommy said, already typing on his phone. "Your appointment is at 2 p.m. Don't be late. And for the love of the moon, Jackson, try not to growl at the receptionist." Chapter 2. Ariana Vance was currently arguing with a radiator. "Come on," she whispered, banging the wrench against the rusted pipe in the back room of her clinic. "Just one more winter. Just one. I'll buy you a nice new valve in the spring." The radiator hissed at her, leaking a single spiteful drop of water onto the worn linoleum floor. Ariana sighed, pushing a stray lock of fiery red hair out of her eyes. Her thick, unruly mane was currently wrangled into a messy fishtail braid, secured with a black velvet ribbon that was fighting a losing battle against gravity. She wiped her hands on her navy blue scrubs, which fit her petite frame perfectly, and checked her watch. 1:15 p.m. Crap, she muttered. She grabbed her utility belt, strapping it around her waist. It held her essentials: a bottle of arnica oil, a reflex hammer, and a bag of dried cranberries. "Julian!" she called out. A chaotic chirping sound echoed from the front desk. Julian, her ring-tailed lemur and receptionist in training, swung around the doorframe, his long, striped tail acting as a counterbalance. He was wearing a tiny red bow tie. "We have a VIP today," Ariana told him, grabbing her keys. "Alpha Jackson Hale, CEO of Hale Sovereign. Rumor has it he eats therapists for breakfast. Be nice. Do not try to unzip his pants." Julian blinked his wide, orange eyes at her, then screamed softly. It sounded like a tea kettle dying. "I'll take that as a maybe," Ariana said. She locked up the clinic and sprinted to her car. Parked at the curb was the Bug, her cherry red 1967 Volkswagen Beetle. It was adorable, round, and had the engine power of a lawnmower. Ariana hopped in, patting the dashboard. "Okay, old girl, let's go pay the rent." The engine sputtered, coughed, and then roared to life with its signature chug-chug-chug rhythm. Ariana merged into the rainy Ethelgard traffic. She needed this client. The rent on the brick building that housed her clinic was going up again, and the leaky pipe wasn't going to fix itself. If she could fix Jackson Hale, the unfixable alpha, her reputation would be set. She could finally stop worrying about money. She could finally stop feeling like she was one bad month away from losing everything. She pulled up to the clinic at 1:55 p.m., adrenaline pumping. But she couldn't park. Blocking her designated spot and half the sidewalk was a matte black armored SUV that looked more like a tank than a car. It was massive, imposing, and clearly expensive. "Seriously?" Ariana groaned, honking her cheerful little horn. "Beep, beep." The SUV didn't move. The tinted window rolled down an inch. A pair of sunglasses stared at her. "You have got to be kidding me," Ariana muttered. She parked the Bug illegally behind the SUV, blocking it in. Two could play at this game. She grabbed her bag, adjusted her braid, and marched toward the door. She was ready for a challenge. She was not ready for the man waiting inside. Chapter 3. The lobby of Vance Holistic Healing smelled of antiseptic and sage. It was warm, cozy, and currently occupied by a mountain of a man who made the room look like a dollhouse. Alpha Jackson Hale was pacing. He had removed his charcoal suit jacket, revealing a white dress shirt that strained across his broad shoulders. His sleeves were rolled up, exposing forearms that looked like they could crush stone. He was scowling at a potted fern. Ariana stopped in the doorway, momentarily struck dumb. He was large and terrifyingly handsome in a "I haven't slept in a week and might bite you" kind of way. Suddenly, a screech cut through the air. Julian, who had been perched on top of the filing cabinet, launched himself. He didn't attack. He just wanted a better vantage point. He landed with a soft thump on the reception desk, right in front of Jackson. Jackson froze. His icy, silver-blue eyes went wide. He looked at the small, striped creature. The creature looked back, snatched a pen from the desk, and screamed. Jackson flinched. He actually flinched. He took a step back, his hands coming up defensively. "What is that?" Jackson rasped, his voice rough. Is it rabid?" Ariana couldn't help it. She laughed. "He's a lemur, Mr. Hale," she said, walking into the room. And he's judging your posture. Jackson whipped around. His gaze landed on her, and the air in the room seemed to pressurize. He scanned her. Fiery hair, green eyes, petite frame in scrubs. He looked confused, as if he expected someone older or bigger or less red. "You're late," Jackson growled. He tried to use his alpha voice, that low, commanding tone that made subordinates drop to their knees. Ariana didn't drop. She didn't even blink. She walked right past him, went behind the desk, and gently took the pen from Julian. "And you're double parked," Ariana countered, handing him a clipboard. "Fill this out. Medical history, allergies, and current pain levels. And please don't growl at the staff. Julian is sensitive." Jackson stared at the clipboard. Then he looked at her, his brow furrowed. "You aren't scared." "I work with knots that make grown men cry," Ariana said breezily, opening the door to the treatment room. "I'm not scared of a little grumpiness. Now, are we doing this? Or are you going to stand there and have a staring contest with the lemur?" Jackson looked at Julian. Julian tried to reach for Jackson's zipper. Jackson batted the tiny hand away, looking horrified. "Fine," Jackson muttered, grabbing the clipboard. "But if that thing touches me, I'm billing you." Chapter 4. The treatment room was dim and quiet. A rain machine played softly in the background, ironic considering the actual rain hammering against the window. "Shirt off," Ariana instructed, sanitizing her hands. Jackson sat on the edge of the massage table. He hesitated. "It's ugly." "I'm a medical professional, Mr. Hale. I've seen ugly. I've seen dislocated hips and necrotic tissue. I think I can handle a shoulder." Jackson sighed, a sound that seemed to deflate his entire massive frame. He unbuttoned his shirt with stiff, jerky movements. He shrugged it off. Ariana sucked in a breath. His back was a landscape of muscle and scars, but his right shoulder was a war zone. The skin was mottled, crisscrossed with silvery, raised lines that didn't look like normal claw marks. They pulsed with a faint, dark energy. It wasn't just an injury. It was a curse mark. The tissue was tight, pulling his shoulder forward in a perpetual, painful hunch. "It doesn't heal," Jackson said quietly, not looking at her. 3 years. It just burns." Ariana stepped closer. "May I?" Jackson nodded, his jaw clenched tight enough to snap iron. Ariana reached out. Her hands were small but strong. She didn't go straight for the injury. She placed her hands on his upper back, on the healthy tissue. His skin was burning hot. He was a furnace. Under her palms, his muscles were hard as rock, coiled tight with years of tension. "Breathe," she whispered. She slid her hands up towards his neck. The moment her fingers brushed the sensitive skin at the nape of his neck, the alpha's kill spot, Jackson reacted on instinct. A low, vibrating growl ripped from his chest. His head snapped up, his eyes flashed molten silver, the wolf coming to the surface. He grabbed her wrist, his grip bruising. "Don't," he snarled. Ariana didn't pull away. She didn't whimper. She stayed perfectly still, meeting his feral gaze with her calm, moss-green eyes. "Jackson," she said firmly, "I am not attacking you. I am helping you. Look at me." He stared at her, his chest heaving. He was fighting the instinct to pin her, to defend himself. "Trust me," she said softly. Slowly, agonizingly, Jackson loosened his grip. He didn't let go, but the violence faded from his touch. He looked at her small hand in his massive one. He looked at the freckles on her wrist. It hurts, he admitted, his voice barely audible. I know, Ariana said. I'm going to fix it, but you have to let me in. She moved her hand back to his neck. This time he shuddered, but he didn't stop her. As she pressed her thumbs into the base of his skull, she felt something shift. The roaring tension in him dropped a fraction. His wolf stopped pacing. For the first time in 3 years, Jackson Hale closed his eyes and let someone else carry the weight. Chapter 5. This is going to sting, Ariana said, her voice deceptively calm. Jackson Hale, currently face down on the treatment table with his face pressed into the padded cradle, let out a grunt that vibrated through the floorboards. You said that 5 minutes ago. It didn't sting. It felt like you stabbed me with a soldering iron. That was just my thumb, Mr. Hale. This is a needle. Ariana reached for the sterile packet on her metal tray. She wasn't intimidated by the sheer size of the man on her table, though she had to admit his dorsal muscles were impressive. They were also rock hard, knotted with enough tension to snap a suspension cable. The cursed scarring on his right shoulder was angry today, the silvery lines pulsing with a dark, unnatural heat that radiated against her palms. Dry needling, she explained, tapping the packaging. We need to disrupt the scar tissue and trigger a twitch response. It's the only way to get the muscle to release the hex's grip. Do it, Jackson mumbled into the cradle, before I change my mind and buy this building just to evict you. Ariana smirked. She located the trigger point, a dense, ropey knot right at the supraspinatus. With practiced precision, she inserted the filiform needle. Jackson's body jerked. A low, guttural snarl ripped from his throat, the sound distinctively animalistic. His hands clenched the sides of the table, the leather creaking under the pressure of his grip. Breathe, Ariana commanded, her voice dropping into her professional register, firm, authoritative, and grounding. Don't fight it. If you tense up, the needle bends. Submit to the sensation. I don't submit, Jackson gritted out, his back muscles spasming as they fought the intrusion. In this room, you do, she countered. She placed her free hand flat on his mid-back, between his shoulder blades. It was a grounding touch, meant to remind his nervous system that he wasn't under attack. I am not your enemy, Jackson. I am the mechanic. Let the engine idle. The use of his first name seemed to short-circuit his aggression. Or maybe it was the unexpected weight of her small hand anchoring him. Slowly, the iron-hard tension in his trapezius began to melt. Ariana worked for 40 minutes. It was a battle of wills. Every time she dug into the cursed tissue, his alpha instincts flared. The urge to roll over and bite, to defend the vulnerable neck. Every time she talked him down, her voice a steady drone of anatomical explanations and dry wit. By the time she removed the last needle and wiped the area with arnica oil, Jackson was limp. He wasn't asleep. His insomnia was too potent for that. But he was stationary. We're done, she announced, peeling off her gloves. Jackson pushed himself up. He looked wrecked. His hair was sticking up in every direction. His face bore the imprint of the cradle, and his eyes were heavy-lidded. He sat on the edge of the table, rolling his right shoulder experimentally. He winced. It feels bruised. It is, Ariana said, jotting notes in his file. But look at your range of motion. Jackson lifted his arm. It went past parallel. He froze, staring at his own limb as if it belonged to a stranger. For 3 years, he hadn't been able to lift it that high without blinding agony. Now, it was just a dull ache. He looked at her. The silver blue ice in his eyes had thawed slightly, replaced by a bewildered exhaustion. "It's quiet," he whispered. "The shoulder?" "No," Jackson said, rubbing his face with his massive hand. "The noise. The pack link. It quieted down." He stood up, towering over her. For a second, Ariana thought he might hug her, or maybe threaten her again. Instead, he just nodded once, a sharp, jerky movement. "Tuesday," he said roughly. "Same time." He grabbed his shirt and stalked out of the room before she could tell him that Tuesday was fully booked. Chapter 6. 3 days later, the bell above the clinic door jingled at 1:45 p.m., 15 minutes early. Ariana looked up from the reception desk where she was trying to wrestle a receipt out of Julian's grip. The lemur was currently shredding her tax documents. "Drop it, Julian," she hissed. "The IRS does not accept confetti." The door opened, bringing in a gust of wet city air and the scent of rain and expensive cologne. Jackson Hale filled the doorway. He looked better. Not rested, the dark circles under his eyes were still bruised shadows, but he was standing straighter. He was wearing a navy suit today, the jacket already draped over his arm, his white shirt sleeves rolled up to expose thick forearms. He was holding a small brown paper bag from the Petit Marché, the most expensive organic grocer in Ethelgard. "You're early," Ariana said, abandoning the battle for the receipt. "And I told you I was booked until 2:30. "I bought the 2 p.m. slot from your other client," Jackson said, stepping inside and closing the door against the drizzle. "Gave him a coupon for my security services. He seemed happy." Ariana gaped at him. "You bribed Mr. Henderson? He's 80 years old!" "I ensured his safety," Jackson corrected. He walked up to the desk. He looked uncomfortable, his gaze darting around the room before landing on Julian. The lemur froze, staring at the paper bag in Jackson's hand. "Here," Jackson mumbled, setting the bag on the counter. "For the staff." Ariana peeked inside. It was filled with Chilean blueberries, the kind that cost $12 a pint. "You brought snacks for my lemur?" she asked, fighting a smile. "It's not a bribe," Jackson said quickly, crossing his arms over his chest. His jaw ticked. "I read that they require high antioxidants. I didn't want him screeching while I was trying to relax. It's a strategic investment." "Uh-huh." Ariana reached into the bag and pulled out a berry. She held it out to Julian. Julian didn't hesitate. He snatched the berry, stuffed it into his mouth, and then, with zero sense of self-preservation, leaped from the desk onto Jackson's shoulder. Jackson went rigid. His eyes widened. He stood like a statue, terrified to move, as the small primate settled onto his expensive suit and began grooming his ear. "He likes you," Ariana laughed, the sound bright and genuine. Jackson looked at her. He stopped breathing. It wasn't the fear of the animal anymore. He was staring at her face, at the way her nose crinkled when she laughed, at the messy red braid falling over her shoulder. A flush crept up his neck, darkening his stubble-covered jaw. "He's heavy," Jackson managed to say, his voice cracking slightly. "He's 2 pounds, Jackson. You bench press trucks." "It's different," he muttered, carefully reaching up to detach the lemur's tail from his collar. He looked at Ariana again, and for a split second, the scary Alpha King looked incredibly shy. Are we going to start, or is he charging by the hour too? Ariana shook her head, grabbing her chart. Come on back, Big Bad. Let's see if we can get that shoulder moving again. As he followed her, she noticed he didn't push Julian off. He walked carefully, balancing the lemur like precious cargo. Chapter 7. It was 9 p.m. on a Friday when Jackson's name flashed on her phone. I locked it up, he groaned the moment she answered. No hello, just pain. I reached for a file on the top shelf and the muscle seized. I can't turn my head. Ariana sighed, looking out her apartment window. The sky over Ethelgard was bruising purple and black. A massive storm front was rolling in off the coast. Meet me at the clinic in 20 minutes, she said. And don't drive yourself if you can't turn your head. Take a cab. By the time she got there, the rain was coming down in sheets, hammering the pavement hard enough to bounce. She parked the Bug next to Jackson's Fortress, which, of course, Tommy had driven him in. Inside, the clinic was cold. The radiator in the back was clanking ominously. Back here, she called out, dumping her wet coat. Jackson was sitting on the edge of the treatment table, shirtless, his posture crooked. His right shoulder was hiked up to his ear in a fierce spasm. You really don't do things halfway, do you? Ariana muttered, turning on the overhead lights. She grabbed her oils. This isn't just a knot, it's a geological event. Fix it, he gritted out. Please. She went to work. The air pressure in the room was plummeting. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the old window panes. Boom! A crack of thunder shook the building foundation. Ariana flinched hard, her hand slipping off his oily skin. She gasped, shrinking back. Thunder terrified her, always had. It reminded her of the artillery fire from the night her old pack had been raided, the night she'd been cast out. Jackson looked at her, confused. To an alpha, thunder was power. It was energy. You're shaking. I'm fine, she lied, her voice tight. Just loud. She stepped back in to work on his trapezius. Crack! Boom! Lightning flashed, blindingly white, followed instantly by a deafening roar of thunder. The clinic plunged into total darkness. The power lines were down. Ariana yelped, backing away blindly. No, no, no! She hated the dark. The dark was worse than the noise. She fumbled for the counter, her breathing hitching into short, shallow panic breaths. Her hip checked the metal tray, sending instruments clattering to the floor with a crash. Ariana? Jackson's voice came from the dark. It was low, calm, deep. I can't see, she whispered, freezing in place. She felt dizzy. I need a light. She took a step and her foot caught on the leg of the rolling stool. She pitched forward, into the black void. She didn't hit the floor. She hit a wall of warm, solid muscle. Chapter 8. Jackson caught her effortlessly. His reaction time was supernatural. One arm banded around her waist, hauling her up, while his other hand came up to cradle the back of her head, protecting her from snapping her neck. He pulled her flush against him. He was burning hot in the freezing room, a solid anchor in the spinning darkness. I've got you, he rumbled. The sound vibrated through his chest directly into hers. You're safe. I'm right here. Ariana clung to his bare shoulders, her fingers digging into his skin. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The adrenaline of the fall mixed with the terror of the storm was overwhelming her system. But then, the scent hit her. Sandalwood, rain, and alpha. It wasn't the aggressive, acrid scent of a strange wolf. It was heavy, protective. It smelled like a fortress walls. It flooded her senses, hijacking her amygdala. Jackson shifted his grip. His large, calloused hand moved from the back of her head to encompass the nape of her neck, holding her there, grounding her. His thumb brushed the sensitive pulse point behind her ear. "Breathe, Ariana," he whispered, his face inches from hers in the dark. The combination was lethal. Her biology short-circuited. High anxiety plus absolute safety plus alpha touch. The glitch in her DNA fired. It started in her chest, a rapid, rhythmic fluttering that felt like a moth trapped in a jar. Then, it expanded. It traveled up her throat, bypassing her vocal cords and resonating in her sinus cavity. A loud, distinct, vibrating sound erupted from her. It wasn't a whimper. It wasn't a moan. It was a motor-like, continuous purr. It was loud enough to be heard over the rain. Ariana froze, her entire body locking up in mortification. She tried to clamp her mouth shut, but the sound wasn't coming from her mouth. It was vibrating through her entire torso. Jackson went rigid against her. He didn't pull away. He didn't laugh. His hand on her neck tightened, not painfully, but possessively. He inhaled sharply, dragging the sound into his lungs like a drug. The tension that lived in his body, the frantic noise of the packlink that kept him awake for days, it just vanished. The purr acted like a sonic EMP on his alpha brain. Silence. Blissful, heavy silence. Ariana gasped, managing to choke back the sound for a second. "Oh, God, No," Jackson rasped. His other hand came up to cup her jaw, tilting her face up in the darkness. His eyes were glowing. 2 orbs of molten silver burning in the black room. He looked drugged. He looked starving. "Don't stop," he commanded, his voice rougher than she had ever heard it. "Do that again." Chapter 9. Ariana's first instinct wasn't fight or flight. It was to dissolve. She wanted to physically atomize into the dark air of the clinic rather than exist in this moment. She was still vibrating. The sound, was a betrayal of her own biology, echoing off the tile walls like a malfunctioning engine. It was loud. It was intimate. And it was happening directly against the bare chest of the most powerful alpha in the city. "Let go," she choked out, her voice straining over the purr. Jackson didn't let go. His hand on her neck was a brand, his thumb stroking the sensitive skin in a rhythm that only made the purring louder. His pupils were blown so wide, his eyes looked black, rimmed by that terrifying glowing silver. "It stopped," he whispered, sounding dazed. He wasn't talking about her. He was talking about the noise in his head. Panic finally pierced the fog of pheromones. Ariana shoved him. It wasn't a strong shove. Her limbs felt like jelly. But Jackson was so entranced, he stumbled back, his hip hitting the treatment table. The contact broke. The warmth vanished. Ariana scrambled backward, her hip checking the doorframe. She didn't wait for her eyes to adjust to the dark. She knew this clinic by heart. She lunged for the break room door, threw herself inside, and slammed it shut. She fumbled for the lock, her fingers shaking so violently it took 3 tries to engage the deadbolt. She slid down the door, burying her face in her knees. Stupid. Defective. Broken. The words from her old pack echoed in her mind. Omegas don't purr, Ariana. Cats purr. Prey purrs. You are an embarrassment. Ariana. Jackson's voice came from the other side of the wood. It was low, rough, and vibrating with alpha command. Go away! She yelled, though it came out as a wet gasp. The session is over. Leave the money on the counter. Open the door. No! Get out! Go find a real doctor who doesn't glitch! There was a silence. Then, the doorknob jiggled. It was locked. Crack! With a sound like a gunshot, the wood around the lock splintered. The door didn't just open. It was torn from the frame. Jackson stood in the opening, illuminated by a flash of lightning from the hallway window. He held the brass doorknob in his hand, looking at it with mild confusion, as if he hadn't meant to rip it off. I didn't mean to break it, he said, tossing the knob onto a nearby chair. He stepped into the break room. He looked massive in the small space, his bare chest heaving, his eyes still wild. Ariana scrambled up, backing until her spine hit the refrigerator. Don't come closer. I have a reflex hammer in the other room. I don't care about the hammer, Jackson growled, closing the distance in 2 strides. He stopped a foot away, looming over her. He didn't touch her. He just inhaled, searching for her scent in the stale air of the break room. Why are you hiding? He demanded. Because I purred, Ariana shouted, tears stinging her eyes. I purred like a pet. It's humiliating. It's a defect. I'm sorry I freaked you out, okay? Just go. Jackson stared at her. The glow in his eyes faded slightly, returning to that icy silver blue. He looked genuinely baffled. Freaked me out? He repeated slowly. Ariana, I haven't heard silence in 10 years. The pack, the voices, they never stop. It's like standing in a wind tunnel. He took a step closer, his expression raw, stripped of all his usual CEO armor. When you made that sound, he whispered, it all stopped. It was quiet. It was peace. He reached into his pocket, or tried to, realizing he wasn't wearing pants with pockets. He sighed, running a hand through his messy hair. I will pay you, he said intensely. Whatever your rate is, triple it, quadruple it, just sit there and do it again. Ariana stared at him. The shame in her chest curdled into anger. You want to pay me, she said flatly, to act like a white noise machine? I want to pay you to save my sanity, Jackson corrected. Get out, she whispered. Chapter 10. Jackson didn't leave. He refused to leave until the storm passed, claiming his driver, Tommy, couldn't navigate the flooded streets. It was a lie. The fortress could navigate a volcano. They sat in the dark waiting room for an hour. Jackson sat on the floor. The chairs were too small for him. And Ariana sat behind the reception desk, clutching a stapler like a weapon. Julian, who had been asleep in his crate in the back office, finally woke up and chirped into the silence. We need to negotiate, Jackson said eventually. His voice was steady now. The alpha madness receded, but he sounded exhausted. There is nothing to negotiate, Ariana said. You fix the door you broke, and you never come back. I can't do that, Jackson said. My shoulder, it unlocked. Ariana paused. She looked over the desk. In the gloom, she could see him rolling his right shoulder. The motion was fluid. The spasm from earlier, the one that had locked his neck, was gone. The vibration, she realized aloud. It broke up the tension. Sonic therapy, Jackson supplied. See? It's medical, not weird. Ariana bit her lip. She hated that he had a point. Her purr was, biologically, a healing frequency. That was why the Moonweavers existed, but her pride was still stinging. I am a physical therapist, she said, not a comfort animal. Fine, Jackson countered. We call it extended manual therapy. You work on the shoulder. If the sound happens, it happens. I pay you a retainer, $5,000 a week. Ariana choked on air. 5,000? 10, Jackson said immediately. And I fixed the door, and the leaky pipe I heard in the back. Ariana looked at the ceiling. 10,000 a week would pay off her loans in 2 months. It would fix the radiator. It would buy Julian unlimited blueberries. Strict boundaries, she said, pointing the stapler at him. You stay fully clothed, no touching unless medically necessary. And if you ever tell anyone about the noise, I will puncture your eardrum with a dry needle. Jackson raised his hands in surrender. Deal. And you have to apologize to the door. Jackson looked at the splintered wood in the hallway. I apologize to the door. He stood up, wincing slightly as his stiff muscles protested. He walked to the window, checking for Tommy. One more thing, Jackson said, not turning around. You aren't broken, Ariana. Whoever told you that was an idiot. Ariana didn't answer. She just set the stapler down, her heart doing a strange, traitorous flutter in her chest. Chapter 11. 2 days later, Monday morning, Jackson arrived at the clinic at 8 a.m. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing dark jeans and a black t-shirt that hugged his biceps so tightly, Ariana worried for the fabric's integrity. He was carrying a red toolbox that looked brand new. I'm here for the pipe, he announced. Ariana, who was currently wrestling Julian into his work bow tie, blinked. I thought you'd hire someone. You're a billionaire. You have people. I said I'd fix it, Jackson said simply. I don't outsource my promises. He marched into the back room. Ariana followed, scooping up Julian to prevent him from helping. The radiator in the back was leaking steadily now, a puddle forming on the linoleum. Jackson knelt, opening the toolbox. He looked completely out of place. A massive alpha king on his knees in a cramped storage closet. Pass me the wrench, he muttered, reaching back without looking. Ariana handed it to him. Their fingers brushed. A spark of static snapped between them. Jackson paused, his hand hovering, but he didn't pull away. You need a new washer, he said, his voice gruff, and this valve is stripped. He set to work. Watching him was distracting. The muscles in his back shifted and bunched under the black cotton as he applied torque to the rusted metal. He grunted with effort, a low, masculine sound that made Ariana's stomach do a flip. Sploosh. The old valve gave way. A jet of rusty, cold water sprayed directly into Jackson's chest. Son of a... Jackson scrambled back, sitting hard on the wet floor. He was soaked instantly. The black t-shirt clung to him like a second skin, outlining every ridge of muscle, every scar. Ariana gasped, then covered her mouth to hide a laugh. Oh my God, are you okay? Jackson wiped water from his eyes. He looked like a drowned, angry rat. He looked up at her, and for a second, he looked ready to explode. Then he saw Julian. The lemur was sitting on a shelf, clapping his tiny hands. Jackson let out a long, suffering sigh. I fixed it, he said, pointing to the pipe. Surprisingly, the leak had stopped. He had tightened the new valve just before the spray hit him. You did, Ariana agreed, grabbing a towel from the shelf. She handed it to him. But you can't go to your office like that. You look like you lost a fight with a car wash. I have a meeting in an hour, Jackson groaned, standing up and dripping water everywhere. I don't have a spare shirt. I do, Ariana said. Well, sort of. It's merchandise. She rummaged in a box and pulled out a white t-shirt. On the front, in bright green letters, it said, Vance Holistic Healing. We've got your back. It was a size large. Jackson was a size XXL. Put it on, she ordered. Or get pneumonia. Your choice. Jackson peeled off his wet shirt. Ariana tried very hard to look at the ceiling, but she failed. His chest was magnificent. He pulled the spare shirt on. It was tight, obscenely tight. It stretched across his chest so tautly the letters were distorted. The sleeves cut into his arms. I can't lift my arms, Jackson stated, standing like a stiff action figure. It's a look, Ariana choked out, her face burning. Very avant-garde. Jackson glared at her, but there was no heat in it. If anyone takes a picture of me in this, I'm doubling your rent. Chapter 12. The clinic was busy that afternoon. Ariana had a full slate. Jackson, surprisingly, stayed. He set up a temporary office in the waiting room corner, typing furiously on his laptop while wearing the tiny t-shirt. He claimed he was monitoring the radiator, but Ariana suspected he just didn't want to walk past the paparazzi outside in his current outfit. At 3 p.m., a walk-in arrived. His name was Marcus. He was a wolf from the River Pack, a neutral territory. He was young, fit, and had a smile that was a little too confident. Hey there, Marcus said, leaning on the reception desk and ignoring Julian's hiss. I heard you have magic hands. My lower back is killing me. Maybe you could work me out? He winked. It was a greasy, suggestive wink. Ariana kept her expression professional. I have an opening at 4:15. Fill out this form. Marcus took the pen, his fingers lingering on hers. You smell good, sweetheart. Like wildflowers. You single? An omega like you shouldn't be unbonded. From the corner, the typing stopped. The air in the room suddenly grew heavy. It tasted like rain and burnt sugar. Jackson stood up. The tiny t-shirt strained dangerously. He walked over to the desk. He didn't say a word. He just stood behind Marcus, looming like a thunderhead. Marcus turned around. He saw the chest. He saw the scars. He saw the eyes, glowing faint silver. Alpha Hail, Marcus squeaked, taking a step back. You're leaving, Jackson said. It wasn't a question. It was a decree. I have an appointment, Marcus stammered. You have a death wish, Jackson corrected. He took a step forward. She is a doctor, not a menu item. Get out. Marcus dropped the pen and bolted. The door chimed cheerfully as he fled. Jackson turned to Ariana. He was breathing hard, his jaw ticking. He looked ready to chase the man down the street. Ariana stepped out from behind the desk. She wasn't scared, but she was annoyed. I could have handled him, she said, crossing her arms. I have a reflex hammer. He touched your hand, Jackson growled. He smelled you. That's what happens in a society, Jackson. People interact. Not with you, Jackson snapped. He froze, realizing what he'd said. The possession in his voice was undeniable. It wasn't protective, it was territorial. He looked at her, his eyes wide, realizing he had just claimed her space in front of a witness. He looked at the tiny t-shirt he was wearing. He looked at Julian, who was eating a blueberry and watching the drama. "I need to check the radiator," Jackson muttered, turning on his heel and fleeing to the back room. Ariana watched him go. Her heart was racing. That wasn't just a client protecting a doctor. That was a wolf guarding his mate. And God help her, she liked it. Chapter 13. The silence in the clinic following Marcus's rapid exit was heavy enough to crush a diamond. Ariana stood in the reception area, her heart still doing double time, staring at the empty doorway. From the back storage room, a head poked out. Jackson Hale, CEO of a billion-dollar security firm, looked utterly ridiculous. The white Vance Holistic Healing t-shirt was strained to its absolute limit across his chest, the sleeves cutting into his biceps like tourniquets. He looked like a Hulk action figure squeezed into Ken doll clothes. "Is he gone?" Jackson asked, his voice a low rumble. "He is currently running toward the county line," Ariana said, crossing her arms. "You scared him half to death, Jackson." Jackson stepped fully into the room, tugging self-consciously at the hem of the shirt, which barely reached his belt line. "He was inappropriate. He sniffed you." "He was a client," Ariana countered, though her voice lacked real heat. "And now I have a hole in my schedule." "I'll pay for the slot," Jackson dismissed, walking over to the front desk. He looked at Julian, who was currently sorting a pile of paper clips by color. Jackson cleared his throat, looking uncharacteristically shy. I ordered food. It should be here in 10 minutes." Ariana raised an eyebrow. "Food? You just threatened a man with dismemberment, and now you want to have a picnic?" "I missed lunch," Jackson muttered, avoiding her gaze. His eyes were that striking silver blue, currently fixed on a stapler. "And I assumed you did too, since you were wrestling wrenches." 10 minutes later, a courier arrived with 3 brown bags from the Gilded Fork, a steakhouse that usually required a reservation 6 months in advance. Jackson set up the meal on the reception desk, moving Julian's paperclips aside. It was surreal. They sat side by side on the rolling office chairs. Jackson ate a rare steak with plastic cutlery, his massive frame dwarfing the furniture, while Ariana picked at a truffle risotto. Julian sat on top of the printer, eating a piece of high-grade prosciutto Jackson had accidentally dropped for him. "Why are you like this?" Jackson asked quietly, breaking the silence. Ariana paused, fork halfway to her mouth. "Like what? Charming?" "Independent," Jackson said. He wasn't looking at her. He was cutting his steak with surgical precision. "You live alone. You work alone. You drive a car that belongs in a museum. You don't have a pack scent on you." Ariana stiffened. She set her fork down. "I'm not a stray, Jackson. I have a pack. Or I did." Jackson stopped eating. He turned to look at her, his intensity sudden and focusing. "Did?" "The Silver Pines," Ariana said, the name tasting like ash in her mouth. "I was born there, but when when the purr started," she gestured vaguely to her chest. "They didn't think it was a gift. They thought it was a defect. Omegas are supposed to be silent, submissive anchors. I was loud." She laughed, a brittle sound. "My alpha said I was broken, that no mate would want a wolf that sounded like a diesel engine. So he cut me loose, gave me 24 hours to clear out." The plastic knife in Jackson's hand snapped. Ariana jumped. Jackson didn't seem to notice. He was staring at the wall, his jaw locked so tight a muscle feathered wildly in his cheek. The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. "He said you were broken," Jackson repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "It was a long time ago," Ariana said, reaching out to touch his arm. His muscle was rock hard. "Jackson, the knife." He looked down at the shattered plastic. He dropped the pieces, his hand trembling with suppressed rage. "What was his name?" Jackson asked. "It doesn't matter." "It matters to me," Jackson growled, turning those burning silver eyes on her. "Because he was a fool. And if I ever find him, I'm going to dismantle his life brick by brick." Ariana's breath hitched. He wasn't just angry. He was lethal. And he was angry for her. "Eat your steak, Jackson," she whispered, her face heating, "before it gets cold." Chapter 14. By Wednesday, the clinic had returned to a semblance of normalcy. Jackson was back at Hale Sovereign, something about a hostile takeover and a board meeting, which meant Ariana could actually focus on her other patients without a jealous alpha looming in the corner. The repairs on the break room door were scheduled for Friday. Jackson insisted on sending his own contractor. So for now, the door leaned sadly against the wall in the back hallway. At 2 p.m., the bell chimed. "Appointment for Mr. Smith," a smooth voice announced. Ariana looked up from her chart. The man standing in her lobby was sleek. That was the only word for him. He had blonde hair coiffed to perfection, a suit that shimmered slightly under the fluorescent lights, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He smelled distinctively of sulfur and cheap cologne, a sharp electric scent that made the hairs on Ariana's arms stand up. "Mr. Smith," Ariana said, standing up. "First time?" "Ideally not the last," he smiled, stepping further into the room. He didn't look at the intake forms on the clipboard. He looked around the clinic, his gaze lingering on the photos on the wall, the equipment, and finally, Julian, who was hissing from the top of the bookshelf. "Charming pet," the man said, "though I prefer dogs, bigger ones." Ariana felt a cold prickle of unease. "Come on back." In the treatment room, the man sat on the table but didn't take off his jacket. "So," he began, watching her sanitize her hands, "I hear you're the miracle worker, the one who fixed Jackson Hale." Ariana paused. She hadn't advertised Jackson as a client. "I treat many people in the city, Mr. Smith. Patient confidentiality is paramount." "Of course," he drawled. "But Jackson, he's special. A cursed shoulder, right? Rotator cuff. Nasty business. Most people say it can't be fixed, and yet I saw him lifting a glass of champagne with his right hand yesterday. Quite the recovery." Ariana turned slowly. "Are you here for treatment, Mr. Smith? Or are you here to gossip?" The man laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. "I'm just curious. Because if Jackson is healed, that changes the market. But if he's just coping, maybe relying on a little crutch..." He stood up. He moved with a predator's grace, blocking the path to the door. "My name isn't Smith," he said, his eyes flashing a sickly yellow. "I'm Alpha Cade. Iron Fangs." Ariana's heart slammed against her ribs. The rival. The one Tommy had warned her about. "I know who you are," Ariana said, keeping her voice steady. She subtly shifted her weight, moving her hand toward her utility belt. "And I think you should leave." "Not yet," Cade said, stepping closer. "I want to know the trick, Ariana. Is it drugs? Magic? Or is it something else? Because Jackson smells like you. And that is interesting. Ariana gripped the handle of her reflex hammer. Get out. Chapter 15. Cade moved fast. Too fast for a human. But Ariana had spent the last 2 weeks analyzing the biomechanics of an alpha. She knew how they moved. He lunged, grabbing for her wrist. Don't be difficult, sweetheart. I just want to. Ariana didn't pull back. She stepped into the space, dropping her center of gravity. As his hand closed around her forearm, she swung the reflex hammer with every ounce of strength she possessed. She didn't aim for his head. She aimed for the patellar tendon of his right knee, the soft spot right below the kneecap that controlled the extension of the leg. Thwack! The rubber head of the hammer connected with a sickening solidity. Cade's leg buckled instantly. The involuntary reflex combined with the brute force sent him crumbling to the linoleum with a howl of shock and pain. You bitch! He roared, clutching his knee. Ariana didn't wait around to gloat. She spun and bolted for the door. Julian, hide! She screamed. She sprinted into the hallway. The break room door was off its hinges. Useless. She couldn't lock herself in there. She scrambled toward the front door, but Cade was already scrambling up, favoring his good leg, his face twisted in a snarl. I'm going to snap you in half, Cade bellowed, shifting. His jaw elongated, fur bursting along his spine. Ariana fumbled with the deadbolt on the glass front door. Her fingers were shaking. Crash! The front window of the clinic exploded inward. Glass rained down like diamonds. A massive black shape hurtled through the broken window, landing on the reception desk with a sound like a bomb going off. It was Jackson. He wasn't wearing a suit. He wasn't wearing the tight t-shirt. He was in tactical gear, half shifted, his eyes burning with a terrifying molten silver light. He roared, a sound so deep it rattled the teeth in Ariana's skull. Cade froze in the hallway, mid-transformation. He looked at Jackson. He looked at the shattered window. He looked at the pure, unadulterated murder in the Alpha King's eyes. Mine, Jackson snarled. Cade didn't fight. He was a bully, not a martyr. He turned and dove through the open window of the treatment room, scrambling into the alleyway like a frightened rat. Jackson made to follow, his claws digging gouges into the reception desk. Jackson! Ariana cried out, stepping over the broken glass. Jackson whipped his head around. His chest was heaving. He scanned her, checking for blood, for injury. When he saw she was whole, the silver in his eyes dimmed, replaced by a frantic human panic. Did he touch you? Jackson demanded, leaping off the desk and landing in front of her. Did he touch you? Chapter 16. The adrenaline crash hit Ariana hard. Her knees shook. He grabbed my wrist, she whispered. I hit him with the hammer. Jackson grabbed her shoulders. His grip was bruising, desperate. I told Tommy he would come. I should have stationed guards. I should have... He released her, pacing the small lobby, kicking shards of glass across the floor. That's it. You're done. Ariana blinked. Done? Closed, Jackson barked. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling a crew to board this place up. You're coming to the tower. You can't stay here. It's compromised. Excuse me? Ariana stepped over a pile of glass. You don't get to close my business, Jackson. It's not a business anymore. It's a target, Jackson shouted, turning on her. He came here because of me, because he knows you're important. I won't let him use you as leverage. I handled it, Ariana yelled back, holding up her reflex hammer. I dropped him. He's an alpha, Ariana. If I hadn't been 2 streets away, if I hadn't felt your fear. Jackson raked a hand through his hair, his voice cracking. I can't function if I'm worrying about you bleeding out on this floor. So your solution is to lock me up in your penthouse? My solution is to keep you breathing, Jackson roared. Pack your things. Get the lemur. We are leaving. Ariana went cold. The tone, the command. It was exactly what the Silver Pines Alpha had sounded like when he kicked her out. You are a liability. Do what you are told. No, she said quietly. Jackson stopped. What? I am not your property, Jackson, and I am not a damsel. She pointed the hammer at the shattered window. You brought this war to my doorstep, but I decide where I go, and I am not going to the tower to be your little secret pet. Ariana, Jackson warned, his voice dropping. Don't be stubborn. It's dangerous. Then leave, she said. Go fight your war. Leave me out of it. Jackson stared at her. He looked devastated. He looked like he wanted to scoop her up and carry her out over his shoulder, but he saw the look in her eyes, the wall going up. Fine, Jackson rasped. He backed away toward the broken window. But I'm leaving a detail outside. Try to stop me. He climbed through the shattered frame and disappeared into the rain, leaving Ariana alone in her ruined clinic. Julian? She called out, her voice trembling. From under the desk, a small striped tail poked out. Julian chirped sadly. Ariana slid down the wall and finally let herself cry. Chapter 17. The silence that followed Jackson's departure was deafening. It wasn't the silence of peace. It was the hollow, ringing silence of a bomb crater. Ariana sat in the wreckage of her waiting room for an hour, numbly sweeping glass into a pile. Every shard that clinked into the dustpan felt like a piece of her sanity. Outside, 2 massive SUVs with the Hail Sovereign logo had pulled up to the curb. 4 men in tactical gear stood guard, backs to the clinic, facing the street. He couldn't just leave, Ariana muttered, dumping the glass into the trash. He had to leave a fortress. She hated it. She hated that she felt safer because they were there. She hated that her hands were still shaking from the encounter with Cade. Over the next 3 days, Ariana went into lockdown. She called a contractor, not Jackson's, to board up the windows with plywood. It looked ugly, like a scar on the brick building, but it was secure. She canceled all her appointments, claiming a family emergency. But she didn't cancel Jackson. She just ghosted him. His usual Tuesday slot came and went. She sat in the dark clinic, listening to the rain hit the plywood, staring at her phone. He didn't call. He didn't text. It was a stalemate, a cold war of stubbornness. By Friday, the isolation was suffocating. Julian was despondent. He spent his days sitting on the reception desk, staring at the door, clutching the empty bag of Chilean blueberries Jackson had brought a week ago. He's not coming, Julian, Ariana sighed, stroking the lemur's soft fur. He wanted a pet. We didn't want to be pets, remember? Julian chirped sadly and threw a paperclip at her. Late Friday afternoon, there was a knock on the door. Not the heavy, demanding pound of an alpha, but a polite, rhythmic tap. Ariana checked the peephole. It was Tommy, Jackson's beta. She unlocked the deadbolt. Tommy looked exhausted. His usually crisp suit was rumpled, and he was holding a tablet like a shield. Ms. Vance, Tommy said, not stepping inside, I am not here to threaten you. I am here to beg. If this is about Jackson, he's dying, Tommy interrupted. The words were flat, devoid of drama. Not literally, but effectively. He hasn't slept since Wednesday. His shoulder has locked up so badly he can't lift his arm to sign documents. The board is circling. The stock is tanking. Ariana crossed her arms, fighting the pang of guilt in her chest. He has other doctors, Tom. He has money. He doesn't want other doctors, Tommy said. He fired 3 specialists yesterday. He's going feral, Ariana. If he doesn't sleep soon, the wolf will take over. And if that happens, Hill Sovereign falls. The pack falls. Tommy looked at her, his eyes pleading. He won't call you. He thinks he frightened you. He thinks he's dangerous to you. Please, just fix the shoulder. Keep him sane. Chapter 18. The Hail Sovereign annual gala was the social event of the season. It was also, apparently, a Shark Tank. Ariana stood in front of the mirror in her small apartment above the clinic. The dress Tommy had suggested and paid for was stunning. A deep emerald green velvet gown with long sleeves and a high neck, but a back that plunged dangerously low. It was elegant, professional, and armor-plated in its own way. I am a medical aid, she told her reflection. I am not a date. She picked up her small medical kit, a sleek black clutch Tommy had provided, stocked with oils, needles, and painkillers. She tucked it under her arm. A knock sounded at her door. When she opened it, Jackson was standing there. He looked wrecked. Even in a tuxedo that probably cost more than her car, he looked like a man hanging on to sanity by a thread. His face was gaunt, the stubble heavier than usual. His right arm was held stiffly at his side, clearly immobile. He looked up. His silver blue eyes landed on her, and for a moment, the exhaustion vanished, replaced by a raw, hungry intensity that made her knees weak. He inhaled sharply, his nostrils flaring. Green, he rasped. It matches my eyes, Ariana said, her voice trembling slightly. Tommy said you needed mobility. Let's get this over with. She stepped into the hallway, locking her door. She didn't wait for him to offer his arm. She walked past him to the waiting elevator. In the limo ride to the venue, the silence was thick. Jackson sat as far away from her as the leather seat allowed, staring out the window. His hand was clenched into a fist on his thigh. Does it hurt? Ariana asked softly. Everything hurts, Jackson muttered. He turned to look at her. Thank you for coming. I know I crossed a line. You did, Ariana said. But I'm not going to let you go feral just to prove a point. I didn't want to lock you up, Jackson said, his voice rough. When I saw him touch you, logic went out the window. All I could see was red. I know, Ariana whispered. She reached out, hesitating, then placed her hand on his clenched fist. Unclench, Jackson. You're going to break a finger. He looked at her hand. Slowly, his fingers uncurled. He turned his hand over, lacing his fingers with hers. His palm was hot, calloused, and enormous. He didn't pull her closer. He just held on, like she was the only solid thing in a spinning world. Chapter 19. The ballroom was a sea of diamonds, silk, and power. The air smelled of expensive perfume and the underlying musk of 100 wolves. Ariana stuck close to Jackson's side. He was in CEO mode, shoulders back, face impassive, projecting an aura of absolute control. But Ariana could feel the tremor in his arm. The pain was radiating off him in waves. Smile, she whispered, as a photographer blinded them with a flash. You look like you're at a funeral. I hate these things, Jackson grumbled through his teeth. Too much noise, too many scents. Just focus on me, Ariana said. Focus on my voice. He looked down at her, and the tension in his jaw eased. That I can do. They circulated for an hour. Ariana watched him charm investors and intimidate rivals, all while hiding the fact that his right arm was practically useless. Whenever he winced, she would subtly press her hand to his lower back, grounding him. Then the music changed. A slow waltz began. Dance with me, Jackson said. Ariana blinked. Jackson, your shoulder. If I don't dance, they'll know something is wrong, he said. Everyone is watching. Cade is watching. She looked across the room. Sure enough, Alpha Cade was standing by the bar, holding a martini and smirking. He was leaning heavily on a cane, the result of her reflex hammer. Fine, Ariana said, but let me lead. They moved to the floor. Jackson placed his good left hand on her waist. He couldn't lift his right arm to the proper position, so Ariana improvised. She took his right hand and placed it on her waist as well, then wrapped her arms around his neck. It was intimate. Too intimate for a medical aid. They swayed. Jackson was a surprisingly graceful dancer for a man his size. Or maybe he was just letting her guide him. He pulled her closer. His chin brushed the top of her head. He inhaled deeply. You smell like rain, he murmured into her hair. And you smell like expensive stress, she quipped, though her heart was pounding. His hands tightened on her waist. The heat of him was overwhelming. The safety. The alpha scent. A tiny, traitorous vibration started in her chest. Ariana froze. No, she whispered. Not here. Jackson felt it. His eyes widened. The silver glow flared in his irises. Ariana. Stop looking at me like that, she hissed. People will see. Let them see, Jackson growled softly. Let them see you're mine. Well, isn't this cozy? A voice sneered. They stopped. Cade had limped onto the dance floor, breaking the spell. He looked at Jackson, then at Ariana with a look of pure malice. Hiding behind your nurse again, Hale? Cade laughed. I must say she cleans up well. For a feral stray. Chapter 20. The music didn't stop, but the conversation around them died instantly. All eyes turned to the confrontation. Jackson released Ariana and stepped in front of her. A low, threatening rumble built in his chest. His right arm twitched, useless, at his side. Careful, Cade, Jackson warned. You're bleeding on the carpet. At least I can walk without a crutch, Cade spat, gesturing to Ariana with his cane. Does the council know you're letting an Omega fight your battles? A defective one, at that? I heard the Silver Pines kicked her out because she purrs like a kitten. A gasp rippled through the crowd. The secret was out. Jackson looked ready to tear Cade's throat out right there on the parquet floor. But before he could shift, Ariana stepped out from behind him. She didn't look ashamed. She didn't look like a victim. She looked bored. Mr. Cade, Ariana said, her voice clear and carrying in the sudden silence. It's fascinating that you're critiquing my biology when you are currently leaning on a stick because a 120-pound woman hit you with a rubber hammer. Titters of laughter broke out in the crowd. Cade's face turned purple. You got lucky, Cade snarled. I got anatomical, Ariana corrected, stepping closer. She looked him up and down with clinical detachment. And speaking of anatomy, your posture is atrocious. You're compensating for the injury by putting weight on your left hip. If you keep that up, you'll have a herniated disc by Christmas. You have the spine of a coward and the muscle density of a pudding cup." The laughter grew louder. Even the elders on the balcony were smirking. "You insolent little..." Cade raised his cane. Jackson moved, faster than thought. He caught the cane mid-swing with his left hand and ripped it from Cade's grip. He snapped the wood over his knee like a twig. "Touch her," Jackson said, his voice a death knell, "and I will finish what she started." Cade looked at the broken cane. He looked at the crowd laughing at him. He looked at Jackson's glowing eyes. He retreated. But as he passed Ariana, he leaned in, his voice a poisonous whisper only she could hear. "You think he protects you? Wait until the fire starts." Jackson didn't hear it. He was too busy staring at Ariana with an expression of absolute, terrifying pride. "Pudding cup?" Jackson whispered, the corner of his mouth twitching up. "It was the most insulting dessert I could think of," Ariana replied, her hands shaking as the adrenaline crashed. Jackson took her hand. "Let's go home." Chapter 21. The ride back to the clinic was silent, but it wasn't the comfortable silence of the gala. It was heavy, suffocating, and tasted like ash. The limo pulled up to the curb. The clinic looked like a wounded animal in the streetlights. Windows boarded up with ugly plywood, security guards standing like statues in the shadows. Jackson moved to open the door, his right arm stiff and useless at his side, but Ariana beat him to it. She stepped out onto the sidewalk, the hem of her emerald green velvet gown dragging on the dirty concrete. "I'll walk you up," Jackson said, climbing out. He looked exhausted, the adrenaline of the confrontation fading to leave him gray-faced and swaying. "No," Ariana said. She didn't look at him. She couldn't. If she looked at those silver blue eyes, she would cave. "You need to go home, Jackson. You need to sleep." "I can't sleep there," he rasped, stepping closer. He reached for her hand with his good left one. "Come back to the tower. It's secure. Cade is terrified of you," Ariana interrupted, pulling her hand away. "But he hates me. He whispered to me, Jackson. On the dance floor, he said, 'Wait until the fire starts.'" Jackson went rigid. A growl built in his chest, vibrating the air between them. "I will kill him." "And then what?" Ariana asked, finally looking up. Her green eyes were wet, but her jaw was set. "Then another alpha comes for the weakness. And another. I am a physical therapist, Jackson. I fix broken things. I don't survive wars." She turned and walked to the side door of the building, fumbling for her keys. "I'm packing a bag. I'm taking Julian. We're going to a motel in Riverton for a while." "You're running," Jackson accused, following her. The security guard shifted uncomfortably, looking away. "I'm surviving!" Ariana spun around, her voice cracking. "I can't do this, Jackson. I can't be your anchor if it drags me to the bottom of the ocean. Look at this place." She gestured to the boarded-up windows. "My life is boarded up because I sat next to you." "I can protect you," Jackson pleaded. It was a raw, desperate sound that broke her heart. "I can fix this." "You can't fix everything with money or muscle," Ariana whispered. "Go home, Alpha. Let me go." She unlocked the door and slipped inside, locking it firmly behind her. Jackson stood on the sidewalk for a long time. He stared at the wood that barred him from the only peace he had found in a decade. He lifted his hand to knock, to break it down, to demand she let him in, but his hand dropped. He turned back to the limo, his face a mask of stone. "Take me to the tower," he ordered the driver. Inside the apartment, Ariana leaned against the door and slid to the floor, clutching her chest. Upstairs, Julian chirped questioningly from his crate. "We're leaving, buddy," she whispered into the dark. "We're leaving before we burn." Chapter 22. 3 days later. Hale's Sovereign Tower was a no-fly zone. The blinds in the penthouse were drawn tight, blocking out the sun, but they couldn't block out the noise. The pack link was a cacophony of voices: stock reports, security updates, Cade's movements, the board's panic. It roared in Jackson's skull like a jet engine. He hadn't slept for 72 hours. Again. Tommy walked into the living room, holding a tablet like a shield. The air in the room was thick with aggressive pheromones. It smelled like crackling static and burnt sugar. "The board is demanding a proof of life meeting," Tommy said carefully. "They think you've gone feral." Jackson was sitting on the floor in the corner, his back against the wall. He was wearing the same tuxedo pants from Friday, though the shirt was gone. His right shoulder was seized up tight, drawn toward his ear in a painful spasm that made turning his head impossible. "Tell them to sell," Jackson grated out. His voice was a wreck. "Tell them I don't care." "Jackson," Tommy sighed, stepping over a shattered vase. "You need to call her." "She left," Jackson snarled. He picked up a crystal tumbler from the floor and threw it across the room. It shattered against the fireplace. "She took the car. She took the lemur. She's gone." He closed his eyes, trying to summon the memory of the sound, the purr. But the static in his head drowned it out. Without her, the silence was gone. The pain in his shoulder was a living thing, biting deeper every hour. "I'm not feral," Jackson whispered, pressing the heels of his hands into his eyes. "I'm just loud. It's so loud." He stood up, swaying. He needed to get out. The tower wasn't a home. It was a cage. He needed the smell of antiseptic and sage. He needed the leaky pipe. "I'm going out," Jackson announced, grabbing a black hoodie from the couch. He winced as he pulled it over his locked shoulder. "Where?" Tommy asked. "To the clinic," Jackson said. "I'll sit in the parking lot. Maybe the scent is still there." Tommy's phone rang, a sharp, piercing sound. Tommy answered it, his face paling instantly. "Jackson, wait," Tommy said, his voice dropping an octave. Jackson froze, his hand on the door handle. "What?" "That was the perimeter detail," Tommy said, lowering the phone. He looked sick. "There's been an incident at the clinic. A fire." Jackson didn't ask questions. He didn't wait for Tommy. He ripped the door open and sprinted for the elevator, the pain in his shoulder forgotten under the crushing weight of panic. Chapter 23. The smell hit him 3 blocks away. It wasn't the scent of sage anymore. It was the acrid, choking stench of wet ash, melted plastic, and old brick. Jackson abandoned the fortress in the middle of the street, leaving the passenger door hanging open as Tommy slammed on the brakes, and ran the last 2 blocks. His hoodie was soaked by the drizzle, but he didn't feel the cold. He only felt the fire in his blood. The clinic was gone. The roof had collapsed. The brick walls were blackened skeletons reaching into the gray sky. Firefighters were still hosing down the smoking ruin, the water turning the debris into a slurry of black sludge. "No," Jackson breathed. He staggered toward the police tape. "Ariana!" "Sir, you can't be here!" a cop shouted, stepping in his path. Jackson shoved the man aside with one arm, his strength inhuman. He ducked under the tape. He scanned the crowd of onlookers, his vision tunneling. Then he saw it. The cherry red Volkswagen Beetle was parked haphazardly on the opposite curb. It was untouched. Ariana was standing next to it. She was wearing a gray oversized sweater and leggings, her hair a wild, frizzy halo from the humidity. She was clutching Julian's travel crate to her chest. She was staring at the ruin of her life with a hollow, devastated expression. Jackson's knees buckled. She wasn't inside. She was safe. He walked toward her. She didn't turn. She just stared at the blackened hole where her front door used to be. "You did this," she whispered when he stopped beside her. She didn't look angry. She sounded dead. "I didn't," Jackson choked out. "I swear, Ariana, I didn't know." "You brought him here," she said, tears finally spilling over her soot-streaked cheeks. "I was safe in Riverton. I saw the news. I drove back, Jackson. I left to keep it safe, and he burned it anyway." She turned to him. Her green eyes were dull. "Go away, Jackson. You're bad luck." She turned back to the car, opening the door to put the crate inside. Jackson stood, frozen. He looked at the wreckage. He stepped closer to the pile of debris that used to be the reception area. Something red caught his eye in the gray sludge. He knelt, ignoring the heat radiating from the bricks. He reached into the ash and pulled it out. It was a tiny red bow tie. It was burnt at the edges, soaked in dirty water. Julian must have dropped it during the evacuation, or left it behind when they packed. It was a silly, small thing, a scrap of fabric for a lemur who liked blueberries. Cade hadn't just attacked a business. He hadn't just attacked a rival. He had attacked innocence. He had burned down the only place in the world that felt like peace. Jackson squeezed the bow tie in his fist. The charcoal scarred his palm. Something inside him snapped. It wasn't a loud break. It was the quiet, final click of a lock disengaging. The pain in his shoulder vanished, consumed by a rage so pure, it felt like holiness. He stood up. He didn't look at Ariana. He turned his face toward the scent of sulfur and cheap cologne lingering faintly under the smoke. "Tommy," Jackson said into his comms, his voice devoid of humanity. "Take her to safety. Guard her with your life." "Jackson, where are you going?" Tommy's voice crackled in his ear. Jackson began to walk. He didn't head for the car. He headed for the alleyway. "I'm going hunting." Chapter 24. The Iron Fangs territory was a grimy industrial district on the south side of Ethelgard. It smelled of rust and river water. It was pouring rain now, a deluge that washed the soot from Jackson's face, but couldn't wash the red haze from his vision. He didn't take the SUV. He ran. He ran until his lungs burned, until the wolf under his skin was clawing to get out. He found Cade in the back lot of a shipping warehouse. Cade was laughing, flanked by 3 of his enforcers. They were drinking beer, celebrating the fire. Jackson walked out of the shadows. He wasn't wearing his hoodie anymore. He had ripped it off blocks ago. He was shirtless, the rain slicking his skin, the scars on his back glistening. His eyes were 2 suns of molten silver. "Hail," Cade sneered, spotting him. He cracked his knuckles, looking entirely too smug for a man who had been limping 3 days ago. "Came to beg for a truce, or did you come to surrender?" Jackson didn't speak. He didn't have words left. He shifted. It wasn't a graceful transformation. It was a violent explosion of fur and muscle. 1 second he was a man. The next, he was a massive, midnight black wolf with silver eyes, standing 4 feet at the shoulder. Cade's smile vanished. "Kill him!" The three enforcers shifted and charged. Jackson met them with a roar. He was a blur of teeth and claws. He didn't fight like a civilized alpha. He fought like a feral beast. He swatted the first wolf aside, crushing ribs. He clamped his jaws on the second one's leg, snapping the bone. Then it was just Cade. Cade shifted, a sandy-colored wolf, smaller and leaner. He lunged, aiming for Jackson's right shoulder, the weak spot, the injury everyone knew about. Cade's teeth sank into the scar tissue. Pain exploded in Jackson's mind, white hot and blinding. But the shoulder didn't lock. The therapy, the weeks of dry needling, of Ariana's small hands working the knots, had done its job. The tissue held. The range of motion was there. Jackson roared, twisting his body. He used the mobility Ariana had given him. He reached back, snapping his jaws onto the scruff of Cade's neck. He yanked Cade off his shoulder and slammed him into the concrete. Crack! Cade whimpered, going limp. Jackson stood over him, jaws open, ready to finish it. The rain washed the blood from his muzzle. "You aren't broken, Jackson." Ariana's voice echoed in the static. Jackson froze. He looked at the broken alpha beneath him. Killing him wouldn't bring back the clinic. Killing him wouldn't stop the noise. He stepped back. He shifted, bones rearranging with sickening crunches until he was a man again, naked and bleeding in the rain. His right shoulder was a mess of fresh bite marks, bleeding heavily, but it moved. He looked down at Cade, who had shifted back to human form, clutching his broken ribs. "If you ever come near her again," Jackson rasped, blood dripping from his mouth, "I won't stop." He turned and walked away. He took 2 steps and stumbled. The adrenaline crash hit him like a freight train. The world tilted gray. He collapsed onto the wet asphalt, the darkness finally rushing in to claim him. Chapter 25. The neon sign of the Riverton Motel buzzed with a dying insectoid hum. Inside room 12, Ariana Vance sat on the edge of the lumpy mattress, staring at the door. She had scrubbed the soot from her face, but she couldn't scrub the smell of smoke from her hair. On the bedside table, Julian was asleep in his travel crate, clutching a stress ball shaped like a spine. Ariana checked her phone for the 100th time. No signal. The storm had knocked out the local towers. "He's fine," she whispered to herself, though her hands were shaking. "He's an alpha. He's indestructible." But she remembered the look in Jackson's eyes before he walked into the rain. It hadn't been the look of a CEO. It had been the look of a man who had nothing left to lose. A heavy thud against the door made her jump. It wasn't a knock. It was the sound of dead weight hitting the wood. "Ariana?" Tommy's voice came through the thin panel, strained and breathless. "Open the door." Ariana flew across the room. She threw the bolt and yanked the door open. Rain lashed into the room. Tommy stood there, soaked to the bone, struggling to support the massive weight of Jackson Hale. Jackson was barely conscious. He was wrapped in a beige trench coat that was 2 sizes too small, clearly Tommy's, and his bare feet were muddied and bleeding. His head hung low, black, wet hair plastering his forehead, and his face was the color of old paper. "Oh, God," Ariana gasped, stepping back to let them in. "The bed! Put him on the bed!" Tommy half dragged, half carried the alpha to the mattress. Jackson groaned as he hit the sheets, the sound wet and ragged. The trench coat fell open. Ariana covered her mouth. His chest was bruised purple and black, but his right shoulder was a ruin. Fresh, jagged bite marks tore through the old, silvery scar tissue. Blood was sluggishly oozing from the wounds, staining the cheap motel sheets crimson. He wouldn't go to the hospital, Tommy panted, leaning against the wall, looking like he might vomit. I dropped you here and went back for him. I had to. The pack link went silent. He took a shaky breath. He fought Cade. He won. But then he collapsed. He woke up in the car and threatened to throw me through the windshield if I took him anywhere but to you. Jackson's eyelids fluttered. He forced them open. The silver glow was gone, replaced by a dull, hazy blue. He focused on Ariana. Safe, he rasped. I'm safe, Ariana said, dropping to her knees beside the bed. She reached for his hand. It was ice cold. You idiot. You absolute colossal idiot. Handled it, Jackson mumbled, a ghost of a smirk touching his split lip. No more fire. Tommy, get my kit, Ariana ordered, her voice snapping into professional mode. It's in the hood of the Beetle. I need the saline, the sutures, and the sterile gauze. Now! She grabbed her keys from the bedside table and tossed them to him. Tommy caught them, nodded, and bolted back into the rain. Ariana brushed the wet hair off Jackson's forehead. He leaned into her touch, his eyes drifting shut. Don't you dare sleep yet, Jackson Hale, she commanded, her voice trembling. You don't get to die on me in a motel room. That is entirely too cliché. Not dying, Jackson whispered. Just resting. It's quiet. The door banged open again. Tommy stumbled in, dripping wet, and shoved the black medical bag into Ariana's hands. She unzipped it instantly. Chapter 26. The room smelled of antiseptic and iron. Ariana's hands were steady, even if her heart wasn't. She threaded the curved needle, her eyes focused entirely on the mangled flesh of Jackson's shoulder. This is going to hurt, she warned. I can't give you painkillers. Your metabolism will burn through them in seconds, and I need you awake so you don't slip into shock. Do it, Jackson grunted through gritted teeth. She began to stitch. Every time the needle pierced his skin, his muscles jumped, rock-hard ridges of tension snapping under her fingers. He didn't cry out. He just gripped the metal frame of the headboard until the steel bent. Talk to me, Ariana said, trying to distract him. Tell me why you did it. Why you went after him alone. Jackson let out a ragged breath. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He burned it. The clinic. It was the only place I could breathe. It was just a building, Jackson. It was bricks and drywall. It was you, he corrected. He opened his eyes, staring at the water-stained ceiling. The tower is cold. My life is cold. That clinic was warm. It smelled like sage. It had a leaky pipe. He turned his head slowly to look at her. I didn't hunt him for the building, Ariana. I hunted him because he tried to burn down the only peace I've ever known. Ariana's hand paused. She looked at him, this terrifying, powerful man who had brought a city to its knees, now lying vulnerable under her hands, confessing that a leaky radiator and a grumpy lemur were his idea of paradise. You aren't broken, she whispered, echoing his words from weeks ago. And you aren't bad luck. I destroyed your life, Jackson argued weakly. Your home is ash. My home is portable, she said, tying off the final stitch. She snipped the thread. And you didn't destroy it. You defended it. She cleaned the wound one last time and taped a sterile gauze pad over the angry red lines. Done, she murmured. Jackson didn't let go of the headboard. He reached out with his good hand, his left one, and captured her fingers. The noise, he said, his voice barely audible as exhaustion finally claimed him. It's back. The pack link. It's loud. Ariana hesitated. Then, she climbed onto the bed beside him. She lay down on top of the covers, carefully avoiding his injuries. She placed her head on his uninjured chest, right over his heart. She closed her eyes. She felt safe. She felt the solid, heavy weight of him, and then she let go. The vibration started in her chest, a deep, steady, rhythmic purr. It traveled through her ribs and into his. Under her cheek, she felt Jackson inhale sharply, then a long, shuddering exhale. His body went lax. The tension drained out of him like water. There, he breathed, his hand coming up to rest heavily in her hair. Silence. Chapter 27. Sunlight sliced through the gaps in the cheap motel curtains, dusty and bright. Jackson woke up slowly. For the first time in 3 years, he didn't wake up with a headache. He didn't wake up with the screaming voices of the board or the pack in his skull. He woke up to a sound. Vroom, vroom, vroom. It was softer now, a sleepy, content idle, but it was there. He looked down. Ariana was asleep on his chest, her wild red hair sprawled across his skin like fire. Her hand was curled loosely around the fabric of the trench coat he was still wearing. He shifted, testing his right shoulder. It was stiff, sore, and throbbed with a dull ache, but it moved. The locking mechanism, the curse, felt broken, shattered by the violence of the fight and the tenderness of the care. Ariana stirred. Her eyelashes fluttered and she pushed herself up, blinking groggily. The purr stuttered and stopped. "Morning," she croaked. Jackson looked at her. She was wearing a wrinkled sweater. She had soot under her fingernails. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "Morning," he rumbled. He reached up with his left hand and cupped her jaw. His thumb traced her bottom lip. The air in the room shifted, thickening with the scent of rain, sandalwood, and claim. "You stayed," he said. "You bled on the sheets," she countered, softly, leaning into his touch. "I couldn't leave." "Ariana," Jackson said, his voice dropping to a serious, gravelly pitch. "I don't want a therapist. I don't want an employee. I don't want a secret." He sat up, wincing slightly, bringing his face level with hers. "I want the noise to stop, forever," he confessed. "But even if the noise never stopped, I would still want you. Because you are the only thing in this world that makes sense." Ariana's breath hitched. "Are you asking me to be your mate, Jackson? Because that comes with a lot of baggage. I have a lemur. I drive a car from the 60s. I purr like a diesel engine." "I love the lemur," Jackson said, dead serious. "I will buy the car a garage. And the purr?" He pulled her closer, pressing his forehead against hers. "The purr is my favorite sound." He kissed her. It wasn't tentative. It was a collision, a claiming. He tasted like rain and copper and raw need. Ariana made a noise in her throat, not a purr, but a whimper, and wrapped her arms around his neck, careful of the bandages. When his skin touched hers, truly touched hers without barriers, the sensation was blinding. It was like plugging into a live wire. The mating bond snapped into place, gold and silver threads weaving their souls together. And then the purr exploded. It wasn't just a sound, it was a physical force. It vibrated the bed frame. It rattled the water glass on the nightstand. Jackson pulled back, laughing against her lips. It was a true laugh, deep and booming. "Do that again," he whispered. "I don't think I can stop," Ariana admitted, vibrating. "Good," Jackson growled, pulling her back down. "Don't." Chapter 28, 6 months later. The new building next to Hale Sovereign Tower was a masterpiece of architecture. It was brick, reclaimed wood, and glass, a perfect blend of modern luxury and cozy warmth. The brass plaque on the door read, "The Hale Vance Center for Holistic Healing." Inside, the waiting room was bustling. A fountain trickled in the corner. The air smelled of sage and expensive coffee. In the back office, Jackson Hale sat on a treatment table. He wasn't injured. He was napping. He was wearing a suit, but the jacket was folded neatly on a chair. His tie was loosened. He was fast asleep, his chest rising and falling in a deep, peaceful rhythm. Perched directly on top of his head was Julian. The lemur was wearing a custom-made miniature tactical vest with the word security embroidered on the back. He was holding a grape in one hand and staring intensely at the door, guarding his alpha. The door opened softly. Ariana walked in, holding a clipboard. She smiled at the sight. "Is he out?" Tommy asked, peeking over her shoulder. "Out cold," Ariana whispered. "He has a board meeting in 20 minutes, but I think we can let him have 5 more. She walked over to the table. She didn't wake him. She just placed her hand on his ankle, a grounding touch. Even in his sleep, Jackson sensed her. He didn't wake up, but a smile touched his lips. He shifted, turning slightly toward her scent. Julian chirped, offering Ariana the half-eaten grape. "No thanks, buddy," she murmured, scratching the lemur behind the ears. She looked at her mate. The scars on his shoulder were faded now, silver lines against tan skin. He wasn't in pain. He wasn't alone. And thanks to the soundproof walls of the new clinic, and the ring on her finger, he finally had his silence. Ariana leaned down and kissed his forehead. "Sweet dreams, Alpha," she whispered. From deep in her chest, a soft, happy thrum answered him. The end. Quick favor, don't go anywhere yet. If you thought Julian was chaotic for trying to fight a wolf shifter, wait until you see the mess the heroine gets into in this next story on your screen. You have to hear this disaster unfold. Click the video on your screen right now. It is absolutely